Hey guys, it's Chris from DSX Machina, and I recently finished the Metro trilogy, video game series. The substandard experience notwithstanding, after the truncated 8-hour playtime of each entry, I was always given an ending I discovered later was considered the bad ending, with exception of the last one. The last one I managed to squeak out the good ending, but I think that was because of the critical consensus of people having issues trying to get the good ending. I didn't particularly like the game. It's a stealth cover based shooter that apparently forgot the core mechanics of stealth cover based shooters requires to actually be fun. Even on normal difficulty, your character will be killed constantly by either cheap shots from monsters you had no hope in defeating. Some opponents would drop right in front of you, forcing you to offload your gun before realizing you were witnessing a quick time event and couldn't kill your target in the first place. A pretty cheap move considering that ammunition is currency in this setting. But I want to focus on that ending because apparently if I made certain choices I didn't realize existed, I could have earned the good ending. But why do bad endings even exist? And I don't mean those extra bits you see when your character dies and you're forced to load a save game. I mean a fully written game closure which have a negative or a depressing effect. Now, on my first playthrough of Dishonored, I kept murdering to a minimum. There were certain situations I admit being unable to avoid, like when I stunned that one guard and he fell into the river, or that uncomfortable moment when I opened the door without looking through the keyhole and was discovered by the housemaid, and in a sudden mouse twitching moment, I covered her mouth and stabbed her through the throat. Yeah, that escalated quickly. But overall, my level of chaos was low, and by the end, I had earned what was known as the good ending. But after playing through the game as a psychopath, gutting prostitutes and stealing children's toys, I found the end the worst ending, shockingly unfulfilling. It was depressing, and I wondered who would play a game with that downbeat of a denouement, knowing a happier ending was an option. I started to wonder why negative endings even existed. Don't all people want a happy ending? Who plays a game with a good bad axis and decides the unpleasant option is the preferred one? Now, Metro was even worse because it never even offered you the impression that there were choices to be made. Like, why can't an ending be organic where events logically lead to a climax a player can appreciate, where implied choices are properly factored in? I always believed that pen and paper role-playing games had strength in this field. Without the demands of industry and production costs, a pen and paper game can do anything. It can go off the rails and end in a place no one was expecting. My first Amethyst campaign changed so much to its life, it was even retconned 6 months in to accommodate changes made by the players. Even though my last campaign had an ending virtually unchanged from its inception, specific motivation, romantic options, and even the identity of the main villain changed based on the natural organic growth of an unscripted game. I do endorse structured campaigns. I want to believe a game is actually going somewhere. But even though I have had games fizzle, I have never personally run a game where the story ran off the rails, though I admit seeing it when as a player. A properly run game can lead to an ending which feels organic, where events flow and factor into a climax that, even though bittersweet, is logical based on events which came previously. Video games have this problem because they are unable or unwilling to shift a game's narrative more than a few degrees off their predetermined path. I admit many GMs have this problem as well, but a good storyteller knows when to adapt their game rather than force players to conform. I'm not preaching a gospel I've always adhered to. I had one campaign result in half the player characters sacrificing themselves, and I'm sure a few didn't really want to. But I've never been in a game as a player or run a game as a GM where the game ended to a point where everyone dies and the bad guy wins. Dogs and cats live together unless that ending was inevitable. I mean, in certain situations, certain events can't be avoided, but I never end a campaign, especially with mine lasting several years, with a downbeat ending that players view as bad. I always assume they want a happy ending, and I run the sequence of events in hope that will happen. Even though I may alter the ending based on player decisions, I won't consider a bad ending, just variations of good. And yet many games I play establish a best ending and a worst ending. But why can't there be several equally valid good endings? Anyway, that was just a quick little rant. Like and subscribe if you want. And this has been Chris from DS6 Machina.